It all started when me and a couple of my buddies proposed an esports team to our school administration. We spent months going back and forth with presentations, budget proposals, and proving that competitive gaming was just as legitimate as traditional sports. After what felt like forever, they finally approved it. When the school announced the esports team at the beginning of the year, we got an overwhelming response. Around 50 kids signed up, with about 12 joining the middle school Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Team, which was our main game. I practiced for hours every day, improving my combos, learning frame data, and studying matchups. All that hard work paid off when the rankings were announced. I placed third, with my high school friends placing first and second. We had this thing where the top three players got special titles based on characters from an anime we all loved. Third place was Wamu, second was SDC, and first was Cars. I was proud of my WAMU title even though I was the worst of our top three. During our practice sessions, I met this kid who was the definition of entitled. He came from a wealthy family, had never worked for anything in his life, and his mom was well known around school for always getting her way. This kid was incredibly annoying and cocky. Whenever he lost a match, he'd complain and call everyone spammers. He was constantly in my face, demanding rematches and throwing tantrums when he couldn't beat me. What really bothered him was that I had the WAMU title and he didn't. He would constantly complain that I didn't deserve to be third and that he should have that title instead. I'd just shrug it off and focus on improving my gameplay. One important detail: I was in middle school while my two friends were in high school. Near the end of the semester, our coach called a meeting about the future of our team. During this meeting, he announced that I would be moving up to the high school team despite being a middle schooler. I was ecstatic. My friends high-fived me as I celebrated. The entitled kid, however, completely lost it. He loudly questioned why I was getting moved up, claiming that I sucked at the game. Our coach explained that I had earned the spot by outperforming most middle schoolers and even beating some high school players, which is why I had the WAMU title. The entitled kid insisted that I didn't deserve it and that the situation wasn't fair. At this point, the kid was actually crying and our coach ended the meeting. I told my mom about it later and she just laughed and congratulated me. The next day at practice, I was walking into the room when I heard an exaggerated throat clearing behind me. I turned around to see a skinny, pale woman standing there with her arms crossed. She asked if I was the third-ranked player. I confirmed that I was while explaining that I was heading into practice but could spare a minute for her. I recognized her as the entitled kid's mom, and my stomach dropped. She acknowledged that she'd heard about my promotion to the high school team and called it impressive in a tone that suggested she didn't mean it. I awkwardly thanked her, but I could tell by her voice that this conversation wasn't going anywhere good. She mentioned that she knew I had met her son and explained that he really wanted to join the high school team to play with the older kids. Then she actually asked if I would please give up my spot for her boy. I flatly refused. When she demanded to know why I wouldn't give up my spot, claiming I didn't deserve it anyway, I politely explained that while I respected her son, I didn't think he was ready for the high school team. I told her that I had earned my chance through practice and added that I probably didn't even have the authority to give away my spot. She reluctantly accepted this and asked who she could talk to about the situation. I offered to take her inside to speak with our coach. I was getting annoyed but tried to stay polite. We went inside and I joined my friends to play some games while explaining what happened. They laughed and told me she was crazy. As we played, we couldn't help but overhear the conversation between the mom and our coach. She was asking why her son couldn't replace me on the team. Our coach firmly explained that they only promote players who have demonstrated skills above their current level, which her son clearly hadn't done. The entitled kid heard this conversation and jumped in, telling the coach that I sucked and claiming I was too scared to face him. After months of listening to this kid trash talk me and my friends, something in me snapped. I yelled at him to come up and play if he thought he was so good, calling him a brat in the process. His mom was shocked and demanded to know what I had called her son. I told her that she had heard me correctly and proposed a challenge. If her son could beat me once in 3 rounds, or even take a single life from my character, I would let him take my place on the high school team. My friends backed me up with similar challenges. The now cocky kid agreed and connected his controller while his mom fumed behind him. Now I should mention that while I'm usually all about respect and sportsmanship, I main one of the most annoying characters in Smash Bros, Ness. For those who play, you know Ness has some moves that are considered spammy and frustrating to play against. I normally try not to abuse these moves, but in this battle, I unleashed absolute chaos on this kid. PK fire after PK fire, followed by back throws and aerials. He could barely land a hit while I took all his stocks with ease. After I demolished him in all three games, both the kid and his mom started screaming at me and the coach. The kid tried to get physical. He swung a punch at me, missed completely, and hit an expensive gaming PC instead. His knuckles started bleeding, and the PC's glass panel shattered. Our coach was livid. Not only did he ban the kid from joining esports permanently, but he also made the mom pay for the $3,000 gaming PC her son had just destroyed. The mom was furious and looked like she wanted to get physical too, but we all pushed her and her son out the door. I felt bad that my friends didn't get to demolish the kid in matches too, but watching him and his entitled mom get what they deserved was incredibly satisfying. And I got to keep my spot on the high school team, where I continued to improve and eventually earned the SADC title the following year. A few years back, I landed a job at one of those big pet retail chains. You know, the ones with everything from hamsters to betta fish to premium dog food. My shift started pretty early, but not crack of dawn early. I'd come in a couple hours before the store opened to the public to clean all the animal enclosures, feed the critters, and make sure everything looked presentable for customers. There was another crew that came in even earlier than me, the restocking team. They'd show up around 4 a.m. on delivery days, twice a week, to unload trucks and get merchandise on the shelves. We rarely crossed paths except for maybe 15 minutes of overlap as they were finishing and I was starting. Our break room was nothing special, just your standard setup with a refrigerator, microwave, a wobbly table with mismatched chairs, and some small lockers where we could stash our personal belongings. There were also vending machines for snacks and sodas, but those things were seriously overpriced. I'm a bit of a snack enthusiast, so I kept a good supply in my locker that I bought in bulk from Costco. But I had one specific weakness: Reese's peanut butter cups kept in the fridge. Something about that chilled chocolate and peanut butter combo just hits different, you know? So I kept a small plastic container in the staff fridge with a couple Reese's cups and 2 bottles of Coca-Cola. I was always happy to share with my co-workers. Since I bought in bulk, my snacks were way cheaper than the vending machines, and my colleagues would usually toss me $1 or 2 when they wanted something. It was a good system, until it wasn't. One morning I opened my container to find a soda and a Reese's missing. No note, no money left behind. I figured someone must have been desperate and forgot to pay me back later. No big deal. But then it happened again and again. I decided to leave a friendly note in my container. Happy to share. Just please ask first or leave $2 if you take something. Thanks. 2 more times my stuff disappeared without permission or payment. It was clear someone was deliberately ignoring my reasonable request, and I was getting annoyed. What really got me was that they weren't just taking one soda, they were taking both bottles and all my Reese's cups. This wasn't desperation. This was entitlement. That's when I hatched my plan for sweet, fizzy revenge. Working at a pet store gave me access to some interesting substances. We had this bitter spray and ointment designed to stop dogs from licking their wounds or chewing furniture. This stuff was nasty. Just a tiny amount would make anything taste horrible for hours. We also kept vinegar around for cleaning the fish tank displays. One evening before leaving, I carefully opened a bottle of Coca-Cola and poured about a third of it out. I replaced most of that with vinegar and topped it off with a bitter deterrent liquid. For good measure, I smeared a thin layer of the bitter ointment around the bottle's opening and lid, then screwed it back on. I secured my precious Reese's in my locker for safekeeping and left only the doctored Coke in my fridge container. The trap was set. The next morning, when I arrived for my shift, I immediately checked the fridge. The bottle was gone. I had to stop myself from laughing out loud, imagining the thief's face when they took that first sip of my special concoction. The bitter spray was designed to linger, so I knew they'd be tasting that awful flavor every time they licked their lips for hours afterward. The following day, I left another note in my container. Hope you enjoyed the special Coke. There's plenty more where that came from if you keep taking without asking. Later that day, my supervisor mentioned that someone from the morning crew had gotten really sick the previous day. I pretended to be surprised and asked what had happened. The supervisor explained that this person had been spitting into the trash can and drinking water constantly for about an hour, complaining that something tasted terrible. I responded casually that it must have been something they ate, while trying hard to keep a straight face despite feeling triumphant inside. I managed to hold back my smile, but inside I was doing a victory dance. I've been teaching English as a language arts teacher in China for about 3.5 years now. It's been quite the experience, and I've grown to love the country and its people. However, there's something I've noticed during my time here that occasionally creates uncomfortable situations. There's a noticeable pay gap between foreign teachers like myself and local Chinese teachers. Most people are respectful about it, but there are always a few who try to take advantage. Sometimes it's small things like charging foreigners more at market stalls, but occasionally you encounter people who feel entitled to your belongings simply because you're not from here. This is the story of one such encounter. It was Chinese New Year, and I was taking the train to Chongqing to visit a friend. I prefer trains over flying. Something about the rhythmic movement and scenery passing by just relaxes me. I was sitting comfortably with my Samsung tablet, watching Final Fantasy VII Advent Children with my Bluetooth headphones on, when I felt something nudging against my arm. I looked over to see a young boy, probably around 8 or 9 years old, trying to peek at my screen. He seemed fascinated by the movie. Being a teacher, I'm used to curious kids, so I turned off my Bluetooth and adjusted the tablet so he could watch too. The boy was clearly enjoying the movie. His English wasn't very good and my Chinese was even worse, but he managed to communicate with simple phrases. He told me he liked the movie and commented on how cool certain scenes were. We shared this moment for the rest of the journey, and he got to watch the entire movie before our stop. When he realized we were both getting off at Chongqing, his face lit up. He excitedly pointed out that we were both going to Chongqing, and I confirmed that I was heading there too. He waved goodbye and ran back to who I assumed was his mother. I smiled and began packing my things to get off the train. That's when things took an unexpected turn. A woman approached me with a boy in tow. In perfect English, she demanded that I give her my tablet. I was sure I must have misheard her, so I asked her to repeat herself. She clarified that she wanted me to give her my tablet because she wanted her son to have it. Was this some kind of joke? I refused. Her response was what really got under my skin. She told me that since I was a foreigner, I could just buy another tablet. Now, I don't know if the kid actually asked for my tablet or if this was entirely his mother's idea. Either way, I wasn't about to hand over my expensive device to a stranger. I come from a family that taught me to never let anyone make me feel less than others or take away my dignity. I explained to her that I couldn't just buy another one as I had to save up for this one, and suggested she could do the same. She insisted that I should give her mine and stop being selfish. At this point, I was losing patience with this entitled attitude. I told her she could stop being an entitled witch and buy her own tablet. I'd never seen someone embody the surprised Pikachu meme so perfectly in real life. To add insult to injury, I made a dismissive gesture and told her to shoo away, as if she were a pest. She walked away, and I thought that was it. A few minutes later, she returned with a police officer. She was standing behind him with a smug, triumphant look on her face while speaking rapidly in Chinese. The officer thankfully spoke excellent English and was very polite. The officer told me that the woman had accused me of stealing her tablet. I let out a deep sigh. I had already wasted enough time on this nonsense. When I'm really frustrated and want to make my point clear, I tend to turn cold and direct. My students call this my Bing Laoshi, ice teacher, mode. I proposed a deal to the officer. I explained that I would use my fingerprint to unlock the tablet, and if it didn't work, she could have it. But if it did work, I would bash her face in. Both the woman and the officer looked shocked. The officer asked if I was serious, and I confirmed that I was. The woman seemed to realize she was caught in her lie and tried to leave, but I wasn't finished. I called out to her, asking where she was going and reminding her that she had claimed the tablet was hers. She looked to the police officer for help, but he just spoke to her briefly in Chinese. I could tell he wasn't interested in entertaining her false claims. I berated her for having the nerve to try to take something of mine just because I was a foreigner. I told her she was disgusting and should be ashamed of herself. The woman's face was a mixture of fear, shock, and anger. I asked her pointedly if the tablet was hers. She quietly admitted that it wasn't. I pressed her to speak up and she said the tablet belonged to me. She finally admitted the truth, grabbed her son, and hurried away. Despite his mother's objections, the boy turned back to wave goodbye to me. I smiled and waved back. The officer inquired if I had been serious about hitting her. I told him the truth. I would never hit a woman over an object. He laughed and wished me a happy Chinese New Year. When I finally reached my friend's place and told them about what happened, we had a good laugh about the absurdity of it all. Just another story to add to my collection of experiences living abroad. I've always had a serious sweet tooth. Growing up in the South, sweet tea was a staple, but I liked mine extra sugary, so much that my family joked I was drinking sugar with a hint of tea. Even store-bought sweet tea wasn't sweet enough for me. After moving to the city for work a few years ago, I found myself missing home comfort foods. When a Meat and Three restaurant opened near my apartment, I was thrilled. For those unfamiliar, a Meat and Three is a Southern-style restaurant where you choose one meat and three side dishes for a fixed price. Simple, hearty food, reminiscent of Sunday dinners at Grandma's house. Last weekend, after a stressful work week, I visited with two co-workers who had never experienced Southern cuisine. The restaurant had a welcoming atmosphere with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fried chicken in the air. When I ordered sweet tea, the waitress told me theirs was extremely good and very, very sweet. Something in her tone, a slight challenge perhaps, triggered my competitive side. I boasted that there was no such thing as tea being too sweet for me, declaring there was no way in hell it would ever be too sweet for me to drink. She raised an eyebrow and gave me a knowing smile, trying to give me an out by asking if I was sure since they made their tea fresh and could make it extremely sweet. Guess I should have recognized this warning. When someone questions if you're sure, it's usually a sign to reconsider. But with my co-workers watching, my pride wouldn't let me back down. I doubled down, insisting I was 100% sure they couldn't make it too sweet for my taste. She walked away with a slight smirk that should have been my second warning. My co-workers exchanged looks, looking amused as one asked if I really liked my tea that sweet. I confidently assured them that nobody ever makes tea sweet enough for me. Minutes later, when our drinks arrived, I immediately noticed mine looked different, a dark brown syrup rather than the amber color of tea. Still committed to my claim, I took a confident sip and my taste buds instantly revolted. It wasn't tea with sugar, but sugar with the faintest hint of tea. The sweetness was so intense it burned my throat like drinking straight simple syrup. My eyes watered, but I fought to maintain my composure. The waitress inquired if I liked it and if it was sweet enough, watching me with thinly veiled amusement. My co-workers stared, waiting for my reaction. I stammered that it was pretty sweet while forcing down another sip, trying desperately not to wince. My co-workers, seeing me struggle, started to laugh. One asked to try it and, after taking a tiny sip, immediately coughed and exclaimed that it wasn't tea but liquid candy. The other tried as well and nearly spat it out, eyes wide with shock at the sweetness. After watching me choke down two more painful sips, the waitress took pity on me. She brought over a half-empty cup of unsweet tea, suggesting I mix it in to dilute my drink. She explained that she and the cook had fun making this special batch just for me and admitted it was pretty entertaining watching me try to drink it. Instead of being annoyed, I had to laugh at myself. She'd called my bluff perfectly. My co-workers each took another turn sampling what they dubbed the sugar bomb. their faces comically contorting with each tiny sip. One of them couldn't even swallow it, discreetly spitting it back into the glass. I admitted defeat, confessing I'd never had tea this sweet in my life. The waitress revealed they had added 3 times the normal amount just for me, and the cook had been watching from the kitchen window, waiting for my reaction. The rest of the meal was delicious. The fried chicken crispy, and the mac and cheese perfectly creamy. I enjoyed my now somewhat diluted tea, though it was still sweeter than any tea I'd had before. When we were getting ready to leave, I happened to look at the bottom of my glass. There, sitting innocently, was a quarter-inch layer of undissolved sugar granules. I pointed it out in surprise, and the waitress explained they had put so much sugar in that it physically couldn't all dissolve in the liquid. She joked that it was probably for the best. If I'd somehow consumed all of it, I might have ended up in a sugar coma right there in the restaurant. We all had a good laugh, and I made sure to leave her an extra tip for being such a good sport about my arrogance. Since then, whenever I return, which is pretty often now, I always order my sweet tea, regular sweet, not me sweet. The waitress and I share a knowing smile, and sometimes when I bring new friends, she tells them the story of the sweetest tea challenge and how I finally met my match in a battle of sweetness I was destined to lose.